August the 5th, 2022, I went into the CVRA, Baton Rouge General, for a routine cardioversion for atrial fibrillation. Everything went fine until it didn't. Things went sideways. They apparently had told my family, she's stable, but she's critical and we don't know if she's gonna make it. I couldn't believe it. I was in shock. My name is Valerie Amato. I'm a registered nurse in the emergency department at Baton Rouge General Bluebonnet. For the most part, I've worked at Baton Rouge General for 15 years. I've always worked emergency pretty much my whole career. I have atrial fibrillation. I was diagnosed about 10 years ago.
Atrial fibrillation is a disorganized rhythm from the top chamber of the heart. It can cause serious problems for patients, it can cause symptoms, and it can put patients at risk for stroke.
I was doing fine, then I went back into atrial fib, and Dr. Pole said, let's just do a cardioversion. It's a very routine procedure, no complications. So the anesthesiologist says, I'm gonna put you to sleep now, and that's the last thing I remember.
The procedure went smoothly until we discovered that her underlying condition was actually sick sinus syndrome, and the atrial fibrillation was disguising that rhythm. This is a very rare situation and oftentimes is unpredictable before the procedure.
Usually their rhythm always comes back bradycardia, which is just a low heart rate, but she kind of hung out in the 20s, and then after that went down to like 14 and then 0. So we pushed the code blue button, slammed the head of the bed down, started compressions, and then at the point where we knew we kind of needed, ICU, respiratory, pharmacy, that's when we called the actual code blue over the whole hospital. It hit home because she's a nurse, she works here. CVRA is actually right over the emergency rooms.
Typically a code blue is called in the hospital because the situation is becoming unstable, and it's important for the medical team to identify that additional help is needed.
They knew when they called code blue overhead that everybody would come running, including ER. We're in the ICU. And when I woke up, I was here. When I opened my eyes, I think it was 2 days later, I saw my sisters, my mom, my brothers, my children, PJ, my daughter PJ, who lives in Mississippi, my son Josh, who lives in Arizona. I looked up and I thought I must have died. I had a tube in my throat, which means you can't talk because it goes right through the vocal cords. So I'm trying desperately to talk, and I realized I had an ET tube, and then I tried to lift my hands and I couldn't. And then I looked around and I had wires coming out everywhere. I'm pretty tough, I guess. I was ready to leave because Dr. Pole asked me, he says, do you want to go home? And I said, yes. I said, yeah, I can do this at home. The next day I started walking. Keith was still with me, my boyfriend Keith. He was still with me. He stayed here for about a week. And he and I, we walked like a couple of houses down the street, and then we would come back. And the next day we went 3 houses down and come back. By the end of the first week, I was walking all the way down and back. By the second week, I was walking a mile. I was going to Ireland in about, about maybe 4 weeks, 5 weeks. I had a trip planned to Ireland to see Garth Brooks, and by God, I was going. I felt very lucky, very blessed. In fact, when the plane landed, when we got out, we went to our hotel and we just kind of started walking around, looking around, and I thought, I can't even believe I'm here. I've traveled all over the world, but that particular trip, because literally 1 month before I had died. Kind of like a reunion. It was so sweet. It was, everybody was, oh my God, she's back. And a lot of people said, we didn't think you were gonna come back. We thought after this you were gonna retire. I love my ER peeps. They're awesome. The whole doctors, nurses, everyone I work with I love. They're just amazing people. I'm much more grateful. I'm much more grateful. I'm happy to be alive.